ask Archbishop, so next cab off the rank, and to, I suppose, challenge of following that act a little bit.
Well, Vince, thank you very much for inviting me here to join you today, and also the opportunity to address you. It's the first time I've ever addressed a group of knights, so I'm very pleased to do it. And also I'd like to extend my personal welcome to Tasmania, and I always feel this part of Tasmania is particularly beautiful, so I hope you really do enjoy the beauty of Tasmania generally, but reflected in this part of this wonderful state. So I'd like to just offer some general reflections, if I may, to you. I'm aware that it's a little bit over 1 century now that the Knights have existed in Australia, and I've known over the years the contribution that the Knights have made, and appreciated the fact they have made a very significant contribution to the life of the Church in a whole variety of ways. I'm going to focus on one area in particular in a few moments. I'm also aware of the origins of the Knights, and I'm sure you're very familiar also with the origins, that they're born really in an age of sectarianism, which was at that stage very much disadvantaging young Catholic men, particularly in being able to pursue their professional careers. I came across I looked at the 2 final verses of the Knights of the Southern Cross anthem. I don't know if you can remember the anthem. Just those last 2 verses, I'll just quote them. We give our aid to a brother distressed. We take up the cause of a brother oppressed. For the cause of one is the cause of all. While he suffers the strings of adversity, then gird us on. The feet of our youth are enmeshed in snares, their progress barred, and the world never cares. We'll free their feet and we'll clear their way to a Christian life of prosperity. Good stirring words, aren't they? However, of course, those words capture, I think, the initial spirit of the Knights, where they're striving to support one another. That issue of the prejudice against the Church and against young people in their careers has largely eased over time, and so the order then began to look to new ways in which they could contribute to the life of the Church, and the Knights have been involved in a multiplicity of commitments and engagements of areas where they've seen that they could serve and contribute to the life of the Church and advance the faith in Australia. And of course they always did that, and something I've always appreciated about the Knights. They've always done that in close association with the bishops and priests. I've always thought the Knights have been very close to working with bishops and priests in the works that they've undertaken over the last century, and I very much want to recognise and acknowledge the importance of that. Of course, one particular area, this is what I'd like to focus on today, one particular area of service the Knights undertook with great commitment, was the establishment of facilities for aged care when it became evident, probably about 50 years ago. This was a growing need in Australia and for the people in the Catholic population. And so, for instance, I remember participating in the 50-year celebrations here in Tasmania, when the Knights here in Tasmania began to establish aged care facilities. In fact, the first aged care facility was begun in the north of the state in 1972. And now the Knights of the Southern Cross have enabled the establishment of 25 aged care facilities across Tasmania. And we are now one of the largest providers of aged care services in the state. I'd like just to look at what it is. What do the Knights bring to aged care? and what do the Knights sought to achieve? Because there are very distinguishing features. I've seen it when I visit the various facilities around the state. It's very evident to me, firstly, the Knights have established facilities of the highest quality of care for the residents. But it's not just business excellence that is important in what the Knights have established here in Tasmania, because what they've provided flows from the faith. Particularly, the Catholic aged care facility is inspired by our Catholic understanding of the dignity of every single human being, and really making that dignity respected, particularly in those final vulnerable years of life. You may be aware that the Castery for the Doctrine of Faith recently produced a document on the dignity of the human person. It's an important statement of what we've believed and our understanding of the nature of the human person. The document states something which is, if you like, quite evident to us as Catholics, but I think it's important to remember that it can be it's quite alien in the minds and cultures of places that haven't really been influenced by Christianity. And so, for instance, it states very simply, the Church resolutely reiterates and confirms the ontological dignity of the human person, created in the image and likeness of God and redeemed by Christ. They're the two things, created and redeemed. They're the things that are central to our recognition of the dignity of the human person. It then goes on to say, the Church draws her reasons for her commitment to the weak and those less endowed with power, always insisting on the primacy of the human person and the defence of his or her dignity beyond every circumstance. Now, I think that lies at the heart of what we do in providing care for the aged in our aged care facilities. It's that deep sense. We want to look after somebody's dignity, particularly when they're more vulnerable, when they're weakened, when they have their own particular needs. So this understanding of the worth of every individual, I think, has been at the heart of the inspiration to what the Knights have done as they've entered into the area of providing aged care, beginning at a time when the government wasn't terribly active in this space. Now, it's a lot more active, but it wasn't 50 years ago when the Knights first took on this particular activity. However, just as the Knights began at a time of sectarian resistance to Catholics, so aged care facilities that the Knights have provided were intended to guarantee Catholics that in their old age they would receive the spiritual and pastoral care that was so important to them. The provision of pastoral care is also one of the hallmarks of Southern Cross care, work of the Knights. And important to mention the pastoral care, of course, is the provision of spiritual support. We're very conscious that a person in the final stages of life needs to be spiritually cared for. Thus, many of our facilities have a chapel and ensure that a Catholic priest is welcomed onto the facility and is able to minister to anyone who requests it. And I think all of us can identify too that a Catholic wants to be assured of an environment of faith which can sustain and encourage them in their final stages of life. And it's always good to see, when I visit the aged care facilities, see Catholic imagery around the place, to see pictures and statues in evidence. Because these do provide reassurance for people. They sense they're in a Catholic environment. And again, I think this is very, very important, particularly in the final stages of life. But now, of course, we have the introduction of voluntary assisted dying, VAD. And so our Catholic facilities become safe places where the elderly know that they will be protected. And that's a great comfort for someone who may be very conscious of their vulnerability and the uncertainties that may lie around the dying process. So in all, what the Knights of the Southern Cross have established across this nation is, and I believe very deeply, something of inestimable value. And I want to personally acknowledge the great contribution the Knights of the Southern Cross have made in moving into the area of aged care over the last half century or so. It's a great achievement and something of great value and importance for the church. However, I think it's true, you yourselves would be aware that you're at somewhat of a crossroads in terms of the future of the Knights. And so I think it's very important that we do need to look at this question of the future of the Knights in relation to the future of Southern Cross Care. How can we ensure this work is able to be continued? How can we be certain and confident that Southern Cross Care will continue to be a truly Catholic work? In many places, it has become necessary to replace the membership of the Knights on governing boards because we now need to have people who possess certain skill sets that are required now by regulation. And so I think it's true to say that the presence and influence of the Knights on the boards of Southern Cross Care across Australia is diminishing. And so the influence, your contribution is no longer what it once was. So how can we ensure that the legacy, this great legacy for the Knights, can be preserved and continued? So I'm sure it's something that many of you wonder about, maybe are grappling with this question. May I just offer some humble suggestions to you? As I mentioned before, the Knights have always had a very close association with bishops. And they've seen themselves as standing with their bishops in the advancement of the Catholic faith in Australia. And that's been a great thing. I believe the time has come now for the Knights to turn to their bishops and to enter into arrangements to ensure that Southern Cross Care remains truly and, can I say, proudly Catholic. In particular, the need is to ensure the ongoing full Catholic identity of these wonderful aged care facilities, without in any way losing their independence. It is possible for, I believe, for Southern Cross Care to become an agency within a diocese under the ultimate governance of the bishop of the diocese. The bishop, perhaps along with the trustees of the diocese, can become the member of the organisation. Here in Tasmania, we have a legacy from the Sisters of the Good Shepherd, a laundry service that they established for women in need, has now become a means by which those with disabilities can find work. Blue Line Laundry is a very successful business, but its real mission is serving people with mental disabilities. It's run the business, has its own board, and it's part of the Archdiocese of Hobart, but the Archdiocese receives no financial advantage at all. It's completely ring-fenced financially. However, what's happened is the mission of the Sisters of the Good Shepherd has really been able to now continue now under the guidance of the Archdiocese. I've always taken a very keen interest in the work of Blue Line Laundry, and recently we've drawn up a charter to assist them identify and maintain their Catholic identity. So I believe that to ensure the future of the Catholic identity of Southern Cross Care, that it's possible for the Knights to begin to talk to bishops and to look at possible forms of governance under a bishop to ensure that Southern Cross Care remains an authentic Catholic agency. So I offer these thoughts to you, and I hope in your consideration and reflection on what is best for the future of Southern Cross Care, these thoughts may assist you in that process. Thank you very much.
All right. Any comments or questions of the Archbishop?
Other than it's a great way of ensuring that, as you reflected, Southern Cross Care remains a Catholic work, not a work of Catholics. Because the work of Catholics who created them, those Catholics will die, and it may cease to be a Catholic work. So let it be a Catholic work in that way.
Thank you.
And brothers, you'll probably note that if you did get a chance to read all the documents, but a Tasmania report actually details the communications with His Grace and the who very kindly, I really appreciate the invitation to that meeting with Grace. It was a huge lift off my shoulders, and I took it to our State Council. Our State Council unanimously endorsed the proposal, and so that's in our report today. It's definitely, I think, an incredibly attractive proposition for us as a dying order to know that the work of the order will continue to be Catholic, which was the intention of all our past brothers.
All right, Brother Greg,
Thank you. That's very nice.
words, gratitude.
Bishop Les mentioned the movie Excalibur, and on my phone I have a quote from that movie, and I have it because it's very poignant, and it also ties in with something Archbishop Julian has presented to us this morning as well, about the origins of the Knights. But I go to this quote from Merlin. Now, I don't know whether you've seen Excalibur as a movie. It was pretty out there in the time when it came out. But Merlin is there representing the old gods. And he says to, can't remember the witch's name, but anyway, he says to her, "The days of our kind are numbered. The one God comes to drive out the many gods. The spirits of the wood and stream grow silent. It is the way of things. Yes, it is a time for men and their ways." Now, the reason I've got that on my phone is that I think we are living in an age now where we're Merlin, where the faith of the church is being challenged by society. And so I take that from your talk, Bishop Les, and Archbishop Julian mentioned about the foundation of the Knights being right up until the 40s, where you'd see job advertisements saying Catholics need not apply. Well, tying these two ideas together, I think we're living in an age, and it's very poignant from what Archbishop Julian was saying about our role in aged care. We live in an age where Catholicism need not apply. And I think that is both in the secular view of the church, but there's also an element of it intra-church. And when I say intra-church, that can be, it's not all malicious, it's a lack of formation. And in fact, and I've said it before many times, our charism as Knights is non-party political ministry. And we need to be able to take, as part of our role, influencing those policymakers, we have many Catholics in positions of power, but they don't want to be, the way these things happen is it's managerialism. So people will want to run a nursing home and they say, well, we can't put too much Catholic stuff in it because we've got to do this because that's what the state expects. And also, no, we, and as Archbishop Julian has said to us this morning, that Catholic, that salt has to be there for those organisations. So I, in thanking our two bishops for speaking with us this morning, just highlight those points that they've brought to our attention, and if I can just reinforce that through their guidance and wisdom, that is the function of the order, and it's just as valid 100 years now from when it was first thought about. The challenges are slightly different, but the work of the Knights needs to be done, and I'd like to thank both our National Chaplain and His Grace Archbishop for bringing those things to our attention. and ask you to appreciate it.